Good evening, friends. Tonight we are going to be studying chapter 2 of Masechtas Beitza. Tonight's class is dedicated in loving memory of my dear mother, Rivka Bas Reb Shloimeh. Before we begin the study tonight, inside the Mishna, I just want to take a moment to talk about Eruv Tavshilin, because that is what much of this discussion is going to be talking about. The rabbis instituted the concept, the mitzvah of Eruv Tavshilin. It's an advent of the rabbis, and we actually make a bracha when making an Eruv Tavshilin. And the purpose of an Eruv Tavshilin is to allow a person to prepare foods on Yom Tov in preparation for Shabbos. So, of course, what we're talking about here is a situation where Shabbos comes immediately after Yom Tov. So this can happen in two ways. The second day of Yom Tov in the diaspora can be a Shabbos. And so the first day, which is the real day of Yom Tov, comes before Shabbos. Or it can come after the second day. Shabbos can come after the second day of Yom Tov, in which it's the extra day that we keep in Chutz La'aretz. In either case, the rule is one must prepare an Eruv Tavshilin if one wants to prepare foods on Yom Tov to be eaten on Shabbos. Now, of course, we're allowed to cook on Yom Tov, but we're not allowed to cook from Yom Tov in preparation for a weekday. So if Yom Tov is, say, on Monday and Tuesday, you're not allowed to cook on Yom Tov for Wednesday, because Wednesday is not a holiday. Now, you can't even cook from the first day of Yom Tov to the second day of Yom Tov, because the first day of Yom Tov is biblically Yom Tov, and the second day of Yom Tov is only Yom Tov from the rabbis, because the rabbis instituted a second day Yom Tov. You see, when the Holy Temple was around and the new month was ordained by witnesses and by a Beis Din. So in those days, many people were unaware as to which day. People who were outside of Eretz Yisrael were unaware as to when Rosh Chodesh was, and in turn, they didn't know when Yom Tov was. So, depending on whether the previous month was a Malay or a Chaser, was a full month or a short month, 29 or 30 days, respectively. So, being that was the case, so in an exercise of caution, they would keep 2 days of Yom Tov as not to violate Yom Tov. Now, in our day and age, people in Israel still keep 1 day as originally was in the temple times. And because our grandparents of old, our forebearers, kept 2 days in the diaspora, so even though this idea doesn't really exist anymore because now we follow a calendar, nevertheless, Maisa Avisenu Biyadenu, the actions of our forebears are still in our hands, and so we still keep 2 days of Yom Tov, even though it's in theory not applicable. In any case, the point here being that one is not allowed to cook from Yom Tov to a weekday, from the first day Yom Tov to the second day Yom Tov, or the second day Yom Tov for the weekday. Now, and neither day of Yom Tov for Shabbos. Cooking from Yom Tov to Shabbos is a Gzeira D'Rabbanan. The rabbis instituted that you're not allowed to do this. Min HaTorah, one would be allowed to do this. One would be allowed to cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos. Now, the rabbis went ahead and prohibited this, with the exception, or with the allowance, that if a person makes an Eruv Tavshilin, which we'll talk about the process later in our discussion today, then one may cook from a Yom Tov to in preparation for Shabbos, with qualifications and stipulations. In other words, terms and conditions apply. So let's jump right into the first Mishnah. Yom Tov Shechal Liyos Erev Shabbos, a Yom Tov that is falls on Erev Shabbos, meaning to say Yom Tov is on Friday, lo yevashel odem batchila b'yom tov l'Shabbos. A person cannot primarily cook on Yom Tov for Shabbos. You can't do it. Even with an Erev Tavshilin, which means that when you cook, one's initial cooking is really done for that day. And we already mentioned this last week. Whatever you cook has to be ready on that day. You cannot, for example, put up a cholent right before Shabbos, which one would do under an ordinary Friday. One can do that right before Shabbos, put up a cholent, and then it'll cook on Shabbos, and then you eat it on Shabbos, the next day. You can't do that on Yom Tov. So your primary cooking is for what? Is for Yom Tov. And then, Avol Mevashel Hu Yom Tov. A person, what he can do is, even with a Erev Tavshilin, he could cook for Yom Tov. And whatever's left over is left over for Shabbos, which means it has to have already been cooked on Yom Tov. Now, in order to do this, what do you have to do? Even to do this, you have to do something. What do you have to do? You have to make a tavshel, you have to make a cooked dish, Me'erev Yom Tov, before Yom Tov started. So in this case, we're talking about Thursday afternoon, because we're talking about a Friday Yom Tov. We're talking about, let's talk Eretz Yisrael here. So Eretz Yisrael, it's one day Yom Tov. The Yom Tov is on Friday. Weekday. So you make, on the weekday of Thursday, you make a cooked dish, v'seimich alav, and you depend on it l'Shabbos for Shabbos. Now, the Gemara explains the two competing ideas as to what the idea of an Erev Tavshilin is about. According to Rava maintains that an Erev Tavshilin is there and instituted in order to protect the sanctity of Shabbos. Meaning to say, if on Friday you're making an Erev Tavshilin, so on Thursday you're making the Erev Tavshilin. So why are you making the Erev Tavshilin? You're making the Erev Tavshilin with the knowledge that Shabbos is coming. And so it forces you to think about Shabbos back on Thursday and to prepare enough food and to make sure that you have all your staples for Shabbos. We're already, because on Yom Tov, you're not going to go to the market and buy foods, and you're not going to start cooking things unnecessarily. So you really have to get your act together for Shabbos back on Thursday, as opposed to the usual week when it's on Friday that you prepare for Shabbos. And so again, Rava maintains that an Erev Tavshilin forces you to start thinking about Shabbos already on Thursday, and so it's there to protect the sanctity of Shabbos. Rav Ashi says that it's there to protect the sanctity of Yom Tov. According to the Torah law allows you to cook for Yom Tov to Shabbos, because Shabbos is, of course, holier and greater than Yom Tov. Now, by disallowing a person to cook on Yom Tov for even Shabbos, one will certainly be aware of the fact that you cannot to a weekday. And then for Shabbos, we give a dispensation or an allowance when a person goes ahead and makes an Erev Tavshilin. So what this does is it protects the sanctity of what? Of Yom Tov. According to, again, Rava maintains it's to remind us of Shabbos while it's still Thursday. According to Rav Ashi, it's to remind us that on Yom Tov, one is not allowed to cook for weekdays. Because by disallowing cooking for Shabbos, one obviously is aware that you're not allowed to cook for a weekday. You have a question?
More like a comment.
Yes.
For the sanctity of the Yom Tov, you don't have to be slaving in the kitchen unnecessarily.
Okay. Now, there is a dispute here. Surprise, surprise. Beis Shammai says shnei tavshilin, 2 dishes. When you make an Erev Tavshilin, 2 dishes. And Beis Hillel says tafshil echad, one dish is enough. The shavin, but they both agree. B'dog u'beitza shalav, a fish that they put an egg on top of it. Today it's actually you see that burgers it's become popular to put an egg over a burger. I don't remember this growing up, but it seems to be pretty popular now in the restaurants.
That's because they discovered there's no protein in the burger.
There is no protein in the burger.
So
It looks like cheese. That's why they do it.
the shavin, b'dog u'beitza shalav, they both agree that a fish with an egg on top of it, shnei tafshilim, that there are two cooked. These are considered two cooked dishes. The egg is one, and the piece of fish is another. Now, the prevalent custom of today is to use a baked item, and you'll soon see why. So you take a little challah, and then a piece of fish or an egg, and that's how you make your eruv tafshilim. So not two cooked dishes, rather one cooked dish and one baked dish. That's the prevalent custom. What if it happens if a person didn't realize or whatever, for whatever reason, he ate the eruv tafshilim on Yom Tov before cooking for Shabbos? Or it got lost. Lo yevashel olav batchila, he cannot depend on it to primarily cook for Shabbos. Speak to your local Orthodox rabbi who will give you instruction in such a case. Bimshir mimenu kolshu. But if some of it was eaten, but some of it was left, so long as there's a kazayas left, an olive size left of this eruv tafshilin, you can still rely on it and cook on Yom Tov in preparation for Shabbos. Mishna Beis, Choliyes achara Shabbos. If Yom Tov comes after Shabbos, so when is Yom Tov? In this case,
Friday.
Sunday. Yom Tov's coming after Shabbos. Choliyes achar Shabbos. If Yom Tov falls after Shabbos, Beis Shammai Yemrim, Beis Shammai says, Matbilin es hakol milfnei haShabbos. Both people and vessels that need to be immersed due to ritual contamination must be toveled, must be immersed in a mikvah or the equivalent before Shabbos. Beis Hillel says, Kelim milifnei haShabbos. Vessels have to be immersed before Shabbos. Va'adam b'Shabbos, and a person can be immersed in the mikvah on Shabbos. So what is the theory here? The theory is as follows. Tikkun. Repairing is disallowed on Shabbos and on Yom Tov. And so therefore, when a vessel is impure, or clothing is impure, it can't be used for truma or for other sanctified items. So now you can't use it for something, and then by immersing it, you can use it for something. This is repairing the item, the spiritual status of the item. So according to Beis Shammai, he says whether it's a person or a vessel, it has to be done before Shabbos, on Friday. And then you can have it for Shabbos and for Sunday, which is Yom Tov in this case. According to Beis Hillel, a person immersing in a mikveh it doesn't look like he's repairing anything. He could be merely immersing to cool off or for pleasure. Again, there are prohibitions against bathing on Shabbos, which is also from the rabbis, but that's not the item that's under discussion here.
Could it be a spiritual use?
That's what we're talking about. That's exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about a spiritual use of the mikveh. It's repairing. We're not repairing it.
I meant for the individual.
Yeah, so that's what we're talking about here.
Problem there or no?
So again, according to Beis Shammai, it's a problem. According to Beis Hillel, it's not a problem. And of course, what is the halacha? According to Beis Hillel, because we go to the mikveh on Shabbos and on Yom Tov. Men who go to the mikveh go on Shabbos. In our day and age, it's only Tfilas Ezra that they're going to the mikveh for. But women go to the mikveh as well. There are some communities that disallow a woman to go to the mikveh on Shabbos if she had an opportunity to go to the mikveh before Shabbos. So it's only when she had no opportunity to go before Shabbos, which means her Yom Tefillah is on Friday night, then she can go. Other communities do allow it. That's a separate discussion. You look like you have a question, Jeff.
No, what confused me was what you said about a person going in to cool off.
No, so Beis Hillel allows a person to go into the mikvah on Shabbos because it doesn't look like he's repairing anything.
Right.
Doesn't necessarily look like he's repairing anything. So, but be that as it may, he allows a person to be immersed in the mikvah for ritual purity on Shabbos or Yom Tov. V'shovin, both of them agree. Both Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree. Shemashikin esamayim b'chli even l'tahara. If you have water that is impure, the way to make impure water pure again is you do hashaka. You allow it to kiss the pure waters of a mikvah. Now, if you have a stone, so let's read the full line here, and then I'll explain further. Reshovin, they both agree. Shemashikin esamayim b'chli even l'taharan. Both allow one to immerse, and not immerse, but to kiss, to do hashaka of waters, impure waters into pure waters in order to purify the impure water. When the water, the said impure water is held in a stone vessel. Why a stone vessel? Stone vessels are impervious to ritual impurity. They're impervious to tuma. So we're not fixing the keli here. Why? Because the keli itself, the stone vessel, was never impure in the first place. Meaning that it was never impure in the first place. So now all I'm doing is fixing the water. Now when it comes to foods, we don't have this issue of fixing when it comes to foods. So food, water, we're fixing the water. The water was tamei, now it's tahar. There's no issue of the repairing of foods on Shabbos. But if it's in another type of vessel, avaloi matbilin, but we cannot immerse the vessel itself when it's a vessel that is able to contract impurity. So whether it's wood or metal or something else, if the water is in there, so then the impure water would get the vessel impure. And now by immersing the vessel with the water, what happens? You're repairing the vessel as well. And that's prohibited, even according to Beis Hillel.
So what was a kli even?
A stone, something that's made out of stoneware.
Stoneware as opposed to klicheres, right?
Earthenware or
Terracotta.
wood.
That's klicheres.
What?
Klicheres is not the same thing as this because I need to.
The klicheres is royal kabel tuma.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that doesn't apply here.
No, we're not talking about klicheres. Stone. Even if a zav stands and sits and drinks with a it doesn't contract impurity.
Right. No, what you said is not stone. What you said is klicheres.
Stone. There are other kliglalim made out of dung. They would dry out dung. It sounds disgusting, but it was done. I think they still do it today in some places, where they create vessels out of that, and that is not royal kabel tuma. So, but a kli even, I believe even according to the rabbis, it's not able to contract impurity. But in any case, what's for sure is that a kli even is not royal kabel tuma at all. Period. Saif pasuk. Not by the rabbis, certainly not by the Torah. So, but other vessels would contract impurity. By immersing them, you're fixing them as well, not just the food. But we may immerse utensils from one purpose to another and from one group to another. The rabbis made a stringent law, and they said that if a person immerses something for chulin, it may not be used for truma. For truma, it might be used for kodesh. Just because I immersed it with the intention for a lower level of sanctity, that immersion is not valid for something of a more strict level. So, or from one group, I immersed it for Israel, and now the Kohanim want to use it for kodesh. One group. So, in such a case, you're not really fixing anything, because Minatorah, an immersion is an immersion. Something that's toivel is toivel. It's only because of the rabbis made this prohibition. And so therefore, everyone agrees that we may immerse from one level of sanctity to create a greater level of sanctity. Beis Shammai says, Mevi'in Shlomim. One is allowed to bring Shlomim sacrifices, peace offerings, on Yom Tov. We have already discussed this in a previous tractate. And they say you do not lean on the animal. But you can bring olos. Olos are fully burnt on the Mizbeach. And private olos, you're cooking something or burning something, not for the consumption, thank you, for the consumption of a human. It's for the Mizbeach. It's for God. We don't cook for God unless it's prescribed in the Torah.
Which it is.
Not private olos. The other sacrifices, the Torah tells us what to do, and that we do, of course, even on Shabbos.
Yeah.
But on Yom Tiv, when we're cooking, we cook for Jewish people. That's who we cook for. That's all you're allowed to cook for. Can't cook for animals. You can't cook for a non-Jew who can cook for themselves. Only for Jews you can cook on Yom Tiv.
But the people, like, say, if they're in your employ and living in your house.
So you could cook for yourself and have extra. But if you're cooking portions, okay, this is 1 apple, 2 you can't cook for them. Anybody who's not a Jew on Yom Tov, only for Jewish people. If you're cooking a pot of soup, so then anybody could partake. Because you didn't cook for somebody, for a non-Jew or for an animal. Mm-hmm. And so according to Beis Shammai, it says you can't even cook for God. Because the dispensation of cooking is only for yourselves, for Jewish people. But you can't, olos, you're not going to eat any of it. And since you're not going to eat any of it, you're not allowed to bring it unnecessarily on Yom Tov. Beis Hillel does not agree with this idea. Maybe in Shlomim v'olos, he says you can bring Shlomim sacrifices and Ola sacrifices, v'simchan aleim, and you may lean on them on Yom Tov. Hey, Beis Shammai says, Lo yochim odem ha'chamin l'raglov. Beis Shammai says, continuing on the same theory as before, one is not allowed to heat up water on Shabbos to wash his feet. Unless these waters are clean enough to drink. And if you drink a little bit, so that whatever's left over, you can wash your feet with this extra warm water. Beis Hillel, on Yom Tov we're talking about. Oh, I'm sorry, I said Shabbos. You're not allowed to, according to anybody, warm up water on Shabbos. Thank you for the correction. Beis Hillel matirin, and Beis Hillel allows warming up water on Yom Tiv for cleaning and washing purposes. And further, he says a person can make a bonfire without the intention of cooking anything, just so to create warmth, because he wants to stay warm. Now, of course, Beis Shammai would say that this is prohibited. Why? Because he says only for cooking, and only cooking for you. There are 3 things that Rabbi Gamliel was machmir like Beis Shammai. What are these things? Aleph, the first one. Ein toimnin esachamen miyom tov l'Shabbos. Hatmana is when one insulates a pot on Shabbos. The halacha is that you're not allowed to insulate a pot on Shabbos. So once we're talking about, of course, off the flame, because when the outside of the pot is now wrapped in wool or a blanket, so it increases the heat, even though it's not on the fire. It's now everything is trapped in, and the temperature actually rises.
A cover, a lid on it, would that be considered?
No.
What about putting it on the blech?
On the blech is a whole separate discussion. We'll talk about that another time. We're going to learn Masechta Shabbos, Mirz Hashem next. We're going to talk about that. So, Ein Toim Min Asachamim Mi Yom Tov L'Shabbos. He says that on Yom Tov, when you are allowed to cook, right? So you cannot do the Hatmana process on Yom Tov for Shabbos. On Friday you could do it. On normal Friday you could do it. For Shabbos you shut the oven, wrap it in blankets, come home from shul. So a lot of people like to do this in the summer months, especially when they don't want to leave a blech running unnecessarily. And so they just have a crock pot running, for their chont, and that's it. V'ein, and furthermore he says, V'ein zeikvin es hamanera b'yomtiv. He says one may not assemble a candelabra on Yom Tov. And he said, because it's like building. Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel disagrees with this. We're not constructing a candelabra, we're just putting back the pieces back together. It's not construction, it's designed to come apart quickly, not non-complex pieces. And assembling this utensil is not building, according to Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai, and of course Rabbi here says that that's usher. And one may not make thick loaves of bread on Yom Tov, because it's a whole job, the kneading of it, and it's a lot of work. And it's unnecessary. If you want to eat something, you can make thin wafers, which is much easier, apparently. It's called tircha de leitzarich. It's a burden that's unnecessary. We don't need to do this on Yom Tov. You can make do with thinner loaves. And of course, Beis Hillel disagrees with this and says you can make thick loaves. You can make challah on Yom Tov. Rabbi Gamliel said to them, Rabbi Gamliel, Mimeyem shall beis abba lo yoifim pitim gritzen el rekikin. In all the days of my father's household, they would never bake thick loaves on Yom Tov. Rather, they would always make thin wafer-like loaves. Amrulai, so they responded to him, what could we do about your father's house? Shoya machmirim al atzmam. They were more stringent with themselves. Umekilin, but they were lenient. L'chol Yisrael, for all other Jewish people. Liyes eifen pitim gritzen v'chayri. They can make thick loaves and even coal-baked bread, which is much more labor-intensive. And that's the halacha. One may do this. Zayin. Rabbi, we said before that Rabbi Gamliel was stringent in 3 cases. There was also 3 cases that Rabbi Gamliel was lenient. Mechabdin bein amitis. He said that one may sweep between the couches. What this means is in the old days they had earthen floors, and sweeping was disallowed on Shabbos, because when you sweep on an earthen floor on Shabbos, so you take invariably there becomes little crevices in the dirt. Thank you, in the earth, and by sweeping you're smoothing it out and you're leveling it, which is building. And so therefore, one is not allowed to. It's a derivative of building. You're smoothing a floor. However, Rabbi Gamliel said that between the couches, you have one couch. People would eat on these couches, these like recliners, like you have on the back deck. That's how they would eat. So,
Terribly uncomfortable.
what?
Terribly uncomfortable.
I guess that's why it was discontinued. Rabbi Gamliel says that in between the it's too small. One's not going to intentionally smooth out. You don't even see what you're doing. You're just getting the pieces out. And so therefore he says that one is not intending to smooth out floors. That's his opinion. The sages disagree. And he says you could put incense on coal on Yom Tov. Why? Because you can burn anyways. You can burn things. But putting incense has nothing to do with eating. It's just making a pleasant aroma in the home. Everybody disagrees, by the way. Everybody agrees, I should say, that you're not allowed to perfume clothing on Yom Tov in this manner. But the question is to enhance my Yom Tov. So he allowed it, and the sages, of course, disallowed it. Once the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash took place, so he allowed cooking a kid in its entirety. It's called a helmeted kid, the whole kid, and eating it. A goat, yeah. On Pesach, the sages disallowed it because they said it looks like you're eating a korban Pesach, but there's no there's no Beis Hamikdash, and so they disallowed it after the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. Ches. So those are the three things that Rabbi Gamliel was more lenient with. Ches. Shloishet dvarim Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah matir. Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah allowed three things, but the Chachamim disallowed these things. Parasa yetza b'ritzua sheben karneha. He says that a person's animal is not allowed to work on Shabbos. Just like you're not allowed to work on Shabbos, a person's animal is not allowed to work on Shabbos. So you can't have an animal carry from a reshus to reshus and walk in reshus harabim with a burden on its back. Only things that it needs for itself. So now, if you put on a coat on it for itself, it's not carrying it. Just like you're allowed to wear a coat, it's allowed to wear a coat. Horses, for example, people put coats on horses. You see that it's quite common. So, in any case, there was an ornamental strap that they would put on the cows on Shabbos. They would put on cows. It's an ornament. It's not needed for the cow. It's just an ornament. So Rabbi Eliezer says that it's an ornament for itself, for the animal, and it's allowed. The Chachamim disallowed it. What kind of animals don't need ornaments?
It's like identifying it as your own or something?
No, it's an ornament. People would ornamental purposes. So they disallowed it with this special strap, this ornamental strap. Now there's actually in Tanya that brings down the story, Rabbi Eliezer, from the Gemara, that Rabbi Eliezer's cows, of course, the Chachamim disallowed it, so he didn't do it. What happened was his neighbor's cow went out with a strap around between its horns, and he didn't say anything. And he ended up, he felt bad that he didn't rebuke his neighbor because the rabbis disallowed, even though he allows it. And so he fasted so much that his teeth turned black in order to do teshuvah for not reprimanding his neighbor. In any case, that's one of his kulas, one of his leniencies. He says one can comb. It's over here they use the term curry an animal on Yom Tov. The way they would do it is when they would brush it out, when they would brush the wool, so it scratches the animal and it draws blood. And he says that since it's any maskaven, one does not intend when one does this to draw blood from the animal. That's not his purpose of doing it, so he allows it. Chachamim disallow it. They say even something that's any maskaven is still not allowed. I have no need for even though I would prefer that the animal doesn't bleed, but the animal's going to bleed. Since it's going to bleed, so they disallow it.
Out the hair. Is that a bigger risk here by combing?
No, that's not discussed here. On Yom Tov, I guess on Yom Tov it's not such an issue. Yeah, and on Yom Tov, you can.
With an animal, when you comb out its hair, isn't that considered work?
It's not work from the Torah. There's no work from the Torah. It's not one of the prohibited official labors. Yeah, you have a fuzzy dog. You have a
told of shochat, right?
What?
Told of shochat.
Yes, told of sheikh. Yeah, slaughtering when you draw blood. It's telad of
shochat. It's pulling out hair too, I think.
No.
No.
In any case. Good. So that's what he says. And of course the rabbis disallowed it. They say even though you don't intend to cause the animal to bleed, they disallow it. And he says that you can grind peppers in a pepper grinder on Yom Tov. But the rabbis disallowed it. We're allowed to, how can you grind it? With a pestle. Rabbi Yehuda, he differentiates. He says, "Ein mekordin nesabeh b'yamtiv mipnei sheisach habura, but mekartzfin." He says that you cannot curry an animal with a metal comb, but you can do so with a wooden comb, because a wooden comb is dull and it's not going to cause bleeding. The Chachamim disallow both, because they're afraid that a person who views somebody using the wooden comb will not know to distinguish between the wooden comb and a metal comb, and they're going to end up using, either them or somebody else is going to end up using a metal comb. And so they disallowed all combing of the animals. Tes, Harichaim shel pilpulin. Once we bring up a pepper grinder, so the Mishnah discusses a pepper grinder in terms of ritual impurity. Tmeya mishlum shleisha kelim. It can contract tuma, ritual impurity, because of three ways, three vessels, three types of ways. One, mishum kli kibble. The wooden part of it is a kli kibble, the part that the actual pepper corns are stored in. Wood, when it's a receptacle, is able to contract impurity. Klima toches, it's also a metal utensil. Metal does not have to have a receptacle in order for it to be susceptible to tuma. And which part is the metal? Of course, the grinding gears are the metal, are made of metal, and so it's able to attract tuma because of the metal. Umishum kli kavora, and also the underneath there was like a sieve-like area. Obviously, this is not a real cloth, but since it's like a cloth, so the rabbis consider it like a cloth, and a cloth is able to, a sieve is able to contract impurity, because a sieve looks like a cloth.
What about today now, where it's like all plastic?
I don't believe you can use a pepper grinder,
No,
even if it's part.
I
Yeah,
wouldn't, but,
yeah. Yeah. Here we're not talking about plastic. Here we're not talking. I want to just clarify a point. In Mishna test that we just studied, we're not talking about Shabbos and Yom Tov. We're just talking about Tuma and Tara. So plastic doesn't help you. The fact that it's plastic doesn't help you in terms of Yom Tov, according to the Chachamim. You're grinding it in its usual grinding fashion.
Right.
What's the difference if it's a plastic grinder or a metal grinder?
No.
Here we're talking about purity and impurity.
Right.
A plastic, if you're asking whether a plastic pepper grinder is royal kabel tuma, the answer is no, it's not. That's your question.
Yeah.
Okay, just clarifying.
Sorry.
Yeah, but in today's day and age, tuma and tara doesn't exist the same way it did back in those days.
Today's day and age, we have little containers.
Yeah,
with
pepper
brown
shakers.
pepper.
Yes. Agola shel koton tmeya midras. Once we're talking about tuma, so the Mishnah here continues. A child's toy wagon is susceptible to midras. What is it talking about? A child's walker that they learn to walk on. Since they lean on it, so it carries the weight of a child. So midras tuma is a tuma that is contracted from a zav or a zava when they lean on something, sit on something, stand on something, lay on something. So these are designed to carry the weight of a person, and so therefore it's able to. That's called midras tuma. Minitelis b'Shabbos, it may be moved on Shabbos. Ve'eni nigreres ela al gabi kelim, but it cannot be dragged except when it's over a carpet or of sorts. What the issue is as we mentioned before, there was earthenware floors, and if you're going to drag this, so you're creating grooves in the floor. So that's like chayrish, plowing is the word I'm looking for. So if you have a carpet down on the floor, so when you move it and you drag it, it's not gonna make indentations in the ground. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with this, and he says, generally speaking, you're right. We have to be concerned about dragging things on earthenware floors on earth on Shabbos because we're plowing. Chutz min ha'agola, except for a wagon, because even though you're pulling it, it's only pressing it down. It's not plowing into the earth. That is it for today. Please join us next week at 8:30 as we continue with chapter 3 of Masechtas Beitza. Have a very good evening.